I'm getting to the point where I'm finally getting to make a piece of content that's different from the norm. Something that I've always wanted to make. My top 5 favorite characters in Langrisser Mobile. Now, before we dive into it all, I want to remind you guys that this is my top 5 favorite characters and not a general top 5 characters in the game. I'm not basing these characters off of power level, nor is it necessarily a tier list to be exact. It's about how I feel about the character. Hopefully we're clear on that. Just have to point that out real quick in case you guys didn't read, because I know it can be hard. Alright, we good? Alright, let's get started. So at the number 5 spot is Curtis. Someone that I strictly use in Apex Arena and also Forbidden Battleground. This guy is mainly a debuff machine. He has an at-again skill where he can copy a single ally's class type, which means that you can have him as a demon class, which is generally terrible because even though you get more stats, they are incredibly weak against holy class. But for Curtis, it doesn't exactly matter because this at-again skill can help you bypass that. His talent can leave a mark so that the enemy deals less damage to him, or he can deal damage if they already have it. If you have his casting skill, he becomes even better. So there's a thing that I've been doing with him is that I would have him at the again to leave a mark and I'll give him that +1 range. And I have the divine boots on him. And the skill set that I've been using is his at the again skill, of course, his Thxs, which has a huge range, and also his passive skill to silence the enemy. With this setup, this allows my Curtis to reach the other side of the map and attack all the enemies, on like the smaller maps at least. I don't really care about him doing damage necessarily. All I want from him is to put some pressure with his debuffs. As an AoE rush player, he fits my playstyle incredibly well. Onto my 4th favorite character is Michelle. Some of you guys may understand that she was my GOAT back in the day, in the good old Apex time. She's a linear AoE attacker who can hit quite hard. She is very slow, so you do want stuff like wings or Apex boosts, but another thing that helps her out is her at the again skill, which summons like a substitute version of herself, like a mirror basically. So if you're using an AoE, this substitute can mimic what she does from where you placed it, and it essentially extends her range. 2 of her AoE skills already have pretty good range, but her 3C is the shortest, which attacks 3 blocks wide and long, while being her strongest AoE skill in her arsenal. If you hit 3 or more enemies, it gets a -3 cooldown, and the max of it is 5. So it's something that you always want to keep on looking out for, so that she can keep the pressure going. Getting her casting skill is something that you absolutely want if you are using her, since it can fully refresh her substitute skill if she hits 3 or more enemies, and since she heavily relies on that, 100% you want it. With her exclusive, she does get that extra range, which is a 50% chance to get when attacking the enemy. And as always, range is great, but there are still some people like myself that still keeps the Scarlet Reaper on her for the extra damage. There's no right or wrong answer, it's more of a personal choice. I feel like back in the day when she was new, people really underestimated her potential, like no one was using her. And I feel like I was the only one of the few people that made her work, and man, I'm telling you that she hard carried me for like what, 3 seasons? And she was doing like at best over 20k damage, or maybe like somewhere near that. But there was a lot of times where she was just like one-shotting people left and right. And to this day, I would still consider her my GOAT, and I would honestly love to use her again, especially with her casting being extremely good. Now before I go into my top 3, I feel like there's a lot of you guys who can guess what they are, at least with 2 of them, but I do want to talk about some honorable mentions. First being Leonhardt. Back in the early days of Langrisser, this man was the first OP character to cross this game. At the time, he was this insane AoE attacker. What made him different was that his AoEs was massive, like the range of it. If he hit 2 or more enemies, then he was able to act again along with self-healing that goes up to half of his HP. He even has stats up too. Now some of you guys may have to understand, or maybe just like forgot, was that back in the day, there was like no casting skills. Like there were characters who were hardly reaching like 1k attack and like maybe more than like 500 or even like 400 defense or something like that. So Leonhardt was pretty much always killing, at least most of the time, and being incredibly tough to get rid of. Oh, and not to mention that his teleport can reach across the map. It has like 7-block range. And a lot of characters back then were very slow. Dude was so ahead of his time. Nowadays, characters have this like insane defense and so many revive characters too, being like very common. So he's not able to pull off the things that he used to do. In fact, he can't do as much damage anymore. Sure, you can get his attack pretty high. I don't think it's impossible. In fact, I'm an advocate for characters still being amazing as long as you're playing very well and know what you're doing. But his AoE damage multiplier is very low. But it's still very cool to see him do all this like crazy stuff. Another honorable mention is Sherry. Not the regular Sherry, but SP Sherry. This changes her talent to having Terrain Master, more attack, and better Thxs activation. One of the skills that she gets in her SP form is that it offers more mobility and heals her if in mixed forces. And she also has skills that offer self-healing. You see a lot of people use her in PvE due to how amazing and yet simple she is, while being a constant damage dealer. You can take her to boss fights and she'll hit quite hard, while being able to sustain herself. Or in other areas where she can consistently get double kills to make quick work of the enemy mobs. If you have her exclusive, she gets a revive when she is in battle, like when she's actively attacking, which does have a cooldown, but with her frequent Thxs, that cooldown is gonna go down rather quickly, along with her other skills too. She is a character that everyone hopefully should have. When you do the new player event, which should be called the Heroic Journey, if you didn't do all of that to get Sherry, you'll have to summon for her, since that event has a time limit. And I'm pretty sure you don't have to like do all of it too. Like I think maybe half of it if I remember correctly. And the only issue with her is that her buffs easily falls off since she can Thxs so often. I can see the argument that Isolde is the better Sherry, since they're pretty much the same, but Isolde just does her thing better. She's always gonna be faction buffing, her skills come back so frequently, and her Thxs activates every single turn. However, it does take time to use Isolde. And plus, Sherry is free to get. She's the best DPS in the Glowy and Princess team, even Meteor too. I would say maybe even off faction too. In my opinion, I would say that she's the #1 best choice to grab her SP stone out of anyone. That's how good she is in PvE. Next on the list is surprisingly Rosen. Everyone knows how broken she is, and just because she fell off in PvP doesn't mean that she's not broken anymore. However, I do want to focus more about talking about her in PvE. Now, support characters are universally going to be incredibly helpful. So just because they don't fit in the same faction doesn't mean that they can't be used to their like fullest. And that especially goes for Rosen. She gives you a ton of healing, even heals after taking damage, while giving you these constant debuff immunity. Getting her just makes you feel so incredibly safe no matter what piece of content that you face. Except for PvP now, since everyone just gets one-shotted, thanks to all these like crazy single target attackers. The other one on the list is Vincent. He has been someone that I've always wanted to talk about. Nothing too special about him other than that he's a pure AoE attacker. Everything he does is all about that, even when he dies. So you put him near the opponents to make him work. It is pretty tough using him in general. Vincent wants to die to continue his pressure, which you can easily ignore him. And despite having flyer mobility, it can be kinda somewhat hard to approach with him in order for anything to get started. Someone that was actually close to being my top 5 is Patricia. The reason why she wasn't is because I just like Curtis a lot more than her, but there are more reasons. So the thing that she does is that she offers her team mobility buffs, and another one where she does damage to the attacker if they kill her teammates. She gives them these buffs so that they go up to the enemies. Patricia doesn't want to engage the enemies herself, but rather have her teammates help her do it for her. Basically, it's range extension. Once you make it work, she can hit extremely hard and provide some strong debuffs. Another way that she extends her range is if they have 3 stacks of her talent debuff, which you really want to be at 6 stars for because it goes up to a 70% chance. And once her exclusive comes out, that problem won't be an issue anymore, unless you're somehow insanely unlucky. But that's not even the worst of it all. Even if they have 3 stacks or more, you cannot use her 3C on the enemy because it's a self-range AoE. So to explain what this means in a simpler way, AoEs with self-range only works on friendly units for whatever reason. So you would have to use skills that has a reachable range to properly make it work. I hate how her 3C was designed like this. It's so dumb. Oh, and you kinda wanna ban healers too, because these talent stacks gets dispelled first, which is worst case scenario if your teammates are dead. Despite these issues, I still do love using Patricia. She is one of my favorite characters to use right now, and with the way how the meta is currently, I think that she does really well since there's really hardly any healers to ban. Now besides Rosen, we're gonna get into some OP characters. One of them I'm gonna mention is Borrelia. She is the best AoE attacker right now in my opinion. Not only can she hit extremely hard, but there's a thing that she can do where she can act again into doing a double attack, along with fixed damage that hits insanely hard too. What makes this even better than it sounds is that stuff like Rosencio's healing, you know, where it heals after you take damage, that effect won't play in yet until after her second attack. But there are some side effects when you do select these like stuff. When you choose the double attack, it reduces skill span. The other options, you can choose to have more range, but you can only move in a straight line. The last option being that she gets a -3 cooldown, but the cooldown to trigger the spell is increased by 1. And you can also have all of these at once, but they do go away after when you use a skill. She can get a permanent range increase whenever you choose different spells, so the first time that you select one, you won't get any, but any different one after that will trigger it. Now if she kills with the 3C, it will actually set them up since it can give her more spells. That's not even the best part yet. She even has a skill to buff up her own int, or rather instead, you can carry a revive skill, which only works whenever you take melee attacks. So if you need a magic attacker, I'd even argue that she could be fine in PvE. It will be annoying to build up that range compared to other characters who have naturally poor range, but she does have good coverage as an attacker, as she has some good single target skills too. Okay, so with those long lists of honorable mentions out of the way, I can finally talk about my third favorite character, which is actually the last OP character on the list. Some of you guys can already guess 2 of them, but I'm willing to bet that none of you guys realize that Ashen is one of my favorites. I pretty much take her to just about mostly everywhere I go. One of them notably in joint battle. She's able to become really strong and physically bulky. She gets these talent stacks that max out at 3 before it gets reset in order to reset her skill's cooldown. She's incredibly versatile due to being able to heal herself, buff, and act against her team. Now these get stronger by using her unique 2C skill, which makes her healing raised by 80% and it can be used on her ally. She can offer a 30% stats increase, and her act again will also give her +2 mobility. She even has her own act again skill that will give her a random buff for every talent stack that she has. Her 3C though gives her a revive if she has 1 or more stacks of it, while doing more damage based on it too, which stuns if she has 2 or more stacks. If she kills with it, she loses all of it while reducing all her skills and moving 5 blocks back. She's a great example of a support DPS. She'll always be fishing for kills, which is something that she can easily pull off due to how much her damage can scale, and it can go pretty high. And let me show you. So her base attack stat is pretty high. At 6 stars, she has a 25% attack increase by using her 2C on herself. She'll get 30% more damage increase from her talent stack if you max it out, plus 45 more from her 3C, and 10% more from her bond effect if she has 5 or more buffs. That's a 55% attack and 85% damage increase in total that you can get, which can rise to 105% using a buff on her, like something like King's Crown on her, or if you're lucky, with her Act Again skill. She's high on the list due to how incredibly versatile that she is. So useful in like a lot of situations. So if you guys been here for a while, these last 2 picks is what you can expect. I may not mention it much, but there are few times that I did, which is Theon, an attacker who's focused on AoE damage to apply tons of debuff and constantly attacking to apply pressure. He can even steal the enemy buffs if using the Goblin Elf. Most of his AoEs are linear besides his like 3C, and every time he uses his AoE, at the end of its range, he applies a spinner tile that does fixed damage to enemies within 1 ring of it. Even his exclusive applies it too. It also has a high terrain priority, which can even get rid of Adon Camel's portal. Kinda crazy sounding, right? Another thing that you can do with these spinner tiles is that you have a choice to retract them, which can do some damage, which means more debuff and such. If you're using Theon, you definitely want Clock on him, because he's a character who doesn't really care about doing damage necessarily, but rather focus more on being annoying as much as possible to the other team without giving them a break. I can guarantee you'll have a lot of fun with them, but if you're on the other side, then not so much. What also makes him one of my top favorite characters is that he's voiced by my favorite Japanese voice actor, Yuki Kaiji, man. He's voiced a lot of my favorite characters from other shows. Love his performance, man. So, with my all-time #1 favorite character, you guys know this. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. It's Angelina. You guys saw it coming, and she's also the waifu. She has been in my Apex box for a very long time, since the beginning, and she still is, as you always see me use her. And like some of the time whenever I make like content, I just have so much confidence whenever I get to use her, and seeing her pop off never gets old for me. If she fails, it's kind of like, dang, I'm actually gonna lose this. The morale just like gets shut down so fast. So what is it that I like about her so much? I mean, just look at her. How can you not like her? But I'm guessing that you guys have no idea what she does exactly. Her talent isn't like anything that crazy. She is from like one of the year 1 characters, so she got like some basic stuff, like just more damage res from being in like a defensive terrain and having more attack everywhere else. Great in her fire class, as she has like good mobility, especially in her aquatic class too, since she gets a lot more defensive and her attack stats is pretty lacking. Her greatest quality is her multiple at the gets. This alongside her casting is amazing, as it gives her a 20% attack increase for 4 turns, which has a 30% to proc whenever she does all that. And with her exclusive, it makes it so that she doesn't lose a buff duration when she acts again 1 time like every 3 turns. Which honestly sounds sad right now, considering that most characters with at-the-gens don't need a gear for that, they just have it naturally. But her 3C, it also lets her at-the-gen if she hits 3 or more enemy, with a 20% chance to freeze on top of that. It'll also push them, so a thing that you could do is like push them out of guard range at-the-gen, and then she can take out like a healer. The usual skills that I bring with her is her 2 at-the-gen skill and her 3C. The other stuff that you may also see me do is have her alternate at-the-gen skill with her 2 AoEs, which is something that I did a lot when Hilda was roaming around. There was also a skill set that I used very little, was Tidal Surge, 3C, and her passive, which lets her at-the-gen if she has no soldiers. It's very awkward to pull off, especially now since characters are pretty bulky with the revive, and Angelina doesn't particularly have the best offensive soldiers right now. They're pretty decent, and with my Angelina not being as defensive, there are times where she just takes way too much damage. And with how characters are right now, I'm afraid that she'll get one-shotted by a counterattack. It's crazy to think about. Lately, I just stick with the main skills due to most characters these days having like cracked out mobility. Oh, and revives too. It's part of the reason why I run a clock on her, just to stall them out. Plus, seeing them frozen in the gas wall, they can't do anything about it, gives me like the greatest pleasure. Like, it's so satisfying. And it goes to show Angelina's absolute dominance on the battlefield. It's amazing. So yeah, I pretty much like using her at the best moment. Unless they have that freaking OP butterfly accessory. You know how annoying that is? And as an AoE rush player, that makes me have to use my brain. And with this kind of playstyle, you're just expecting some like ooga booga damage. And also debuffs. I mean, there are some thought process when I play, of course, but I just hate how it hard counters Angelina. It only gets worse from here on out with the equipment banner and just like more battle passes, otherwise known as Eternal Flame Forge. You pretty much see that thing everywhere. Besides that, I pretty much use her whenever I get the chance, regardless of other characters being a lot better. That's just how much I love this girl. especially so much fun in PvP. Alright, with some honorable mentions, that was my top 5 favorite characters. I know it was kind of a lot of yapping, but I feel like I had to give some reasonings to it all. But I would honestly like to hear your guys' favorite character down in the comments. So if you did enjoy this video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Oh, and also let me know down in the comments if you want to see more videos like this or something similar. So yeah, thanks for watching. Your fellow Z.